In today's weekend news roundup, Walwyn denounces indemnity of commissioner. Police confirm breach of trust charge. DPP Office refutes Walwyn's statement, accuses him of attempting to influence jurors. First District highly unlikely to have a by-election after Fahie's departure from the House of Assembly, says Premier Wheatley. Honorable Rymer calls for a standard to be placed across the board when disciplining public officers. And government open to fuel subsidiary extension. Response remains dynamic, says Wheatley. Honorable Rymer eyes early 2023 completion of the Market Square and Culture and Tourism Month officially opened. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.
Freeze. Choose your mix. Choose your flavor.
Welcome everybody. It's Saturday, November 5th, 2022. I'm Ron Grant coming to you live and direct from Tortola in the Virgin Islands. A happy Saturday to one and all. I hope that you are having a great weekend and thank you so much for joining us. This is your weekly news roundup bringing you the top stories of this past week. Premier Dr. the Honorable Natalio D. Wheatley and Deputy Premier Honorable Kai Rymer have assured that the government remains dynamic in its response to the growing cost of living and more specifically increased electricity costs resulting from high global oil prices. Recently, while fielding questions from the press, Wheatley expressed that he has been pleased with the feedback he has received surrounding the government's fuel surcharge subsidiary.
We're happy that subsidy has been applied. So just for persons, to remind persons, it was 50% of the fuel surcharge for October, the bill that's due in October, 50% for the bill due in November, and also 100% of the fuel surcharge in December. And certainly we always have to keep an eye on the situation, as you said. As Honorable Rymer said, we all hope that fuel prices will go down soon. And if we continue to face these challenges, certainly we'll have to see what it is we can do to bring some level of relief to the public.
Rymer noted that an extension of the existing subsidy may be on the table and that it is something he will bring to the attention of the Ministry of Finance if necessary.
Well, our plan is to ease the burden for the customer. I can't speak for the Minister of Finance, but I will surely be prompting him, if the prices remain the same, that we find some sort of funds to continue this ease for our residential customers.
The Premier, however, noted that the possibility of such extensions weighs heavily on the territory's ability to finance them, meaning that the territory must do its best to make the necessary funds available.
We certainly have to do all we can to ensure that we have a very good tourist season, which brings in the dollars, to make sure that we protect our financial services industry, that we seek ways to diversify our economy so that we can, increase our gross domestic product here and also increase government revenues. It's a difficult task that we're in right now, of course, having to finance everything that we have to finance, but certainly we can't forget about the welfare of our people.
Deputy Premier of the Virgin Islands and Minister for Communications and Works, the Honorable Kai M. Rymer, is calling for a standard to be placed across the board when penalizing public officers, adding that criminal charges should be the last resort after all of the other avenues have been exhausted. Rymer's comments came at the heel of a number of recent arrests of public officers. He said the recent developments surrounding public officers who have been criminally charged have created a difficult work environment in some of the government ministries, where public officers are now fearful of conducting their duties. Rymer also called for a closer look into the processes used, adding that he hopes the correct channels were utilized in the respective cases. He said that he asked the Premier to look into the cases to bring more clarity on the matters and to provide a report to the House of Assembly.
We are seeing now also where public officers are being charged criminally. Madam Speaker, I was a public officer, and I know there's the Public Service Commission where you would first go there and they would decide on what is to take place. But we are seeing now public officers going straight to be arrested and charged. And, Madam Speaker, there is now this trepidation within the government, and it's very difficult right now as even ministers to get anything achieved based on what is happening with public officers who are doing their jobs.
Meanwhile, at a subsequent press conference, Premier Dr. the Honorable Nathaniel D. Wheatley said he will look into the matters, but warned that due to the separation of powers, he cannot instruct or influence any of the other branches of government.
We need to look at this closely. We cannot just be deciding what should be done for whom and for what, and we should, there should be a standard across the board. You have public officers now saying, I ain't doing this because I ain't going to get locked up. I don't want to do this. But Madam Speaker, we have a country to run. But I could understand what they're going through because I was a public officer as well. And I hope that those processes were followed, because going through the public service, the general orders, it tells you if you have an issue, whether you did something wrong, you would get whether a suspension or something on your record. But to take somebody straight to the courthouse, I think something is wrong there, Madam Speaker.
Some of the recent arrests of public officers include former director of the International Affairs Secretariat, Najon Christopher, who was charged with breach of trust by a public officer and false assumption of authority for a diplomatic note which was sent from the Premier's office on May 3rd. Public officer in the Ministry of Education, Ms. Lorna Stevens, for breach of trust in relation to the Elmore Stout High School perimeter wall, and most recently, which we're going to get into, former Education Minister Myron V. Walwyn was also charged with breach of trust for his role in the Elmore Stout High School perimeter wall. Continuing on, regarding the concerns about a by-election, it is highly unlikely that there will be a by-election in the 1st electoral district for the seat of the former Premier and representative for the 1st district, Mr. Andrew Foy, who will be made to vacate his seat at the end of the next sitting of the House of Assembly. Now, this is according to Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable Nathaniel D. Wheatley, who made this disclosure at a recent press conference in response to a question posed on the subject by the media. Premier Wheatley first sought to correct his previous statement where he said that a member would have to vacate their elected seat in the House of Assembly if they miss 3 consecutive sittings without the excuse of the Speaker of the House. He has now changed and said following discussions with his team, it was clarified apparently that a member of the House would have to miss more than 3 consecutive sittings before being made to vacate his or her seat.
I was saying first that if you miss 3 consecutive sit-ins, the seat would be vacated, but that was not completely accurate. It's more than 3 consecutive sit-ins, which would be 4, at minimum 4. So we'll be starting the 4th sit-in on Tuesday, and at the conclusion of that sit-in, the seat would be vacated. Of course, unless the member shows up, which is unlikely.
Or the Speaker.
Or whether the Speaker excuses, but we already know what the Speaker's position is on that.
In mid-July, Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Honorable Corinne George Mascott, rejected Foy's notice of absence for the then sitting and all future sittings of the House of Assembly. At the time, she said the former Premier cited his bail conditions as the reason why he was not able to attend the previous and future House of Assembly sittings, but said the delaying of his trial from July 18, 2022 to January 2023 weighed heavily in her decision to deny the former Premier's request. Speaking during the recent press conference, Premier Wheatley explained that the next sitting of the House of Assembly will be concluded by November 12, 2022 to trigger a by-election in the 1st District. This, he said, was highly unlikely due to the vast schedule of items to be brought before the House during the next sitting.
To have a by-election that sitting has to finish before November 12th. And I think it's unlikely. It's unlikely, the sitting starts on the 1st, and it's unlikely that the sitting will finish before the 12th. Under the amended Elections Act, if the House dissolves within 4 months of when the seat becomes vacant, then you don't have to go to a by-election. And we'll just have a general election in May. But it's unlikely that we'll finish before November 12th because we have some very heavy bills on the order paper and a lot that we want to get accomplished before we have budget day. Budget day is, of course, when we give the budget speech, and then we have to do stand-in finance, and we have to come back and have the budget debate all before the close of the year so that we can have a budget ready for January 1st. So we have to have budget day, and we'll have to close off the sit-ins so that we can do the budget. So and with some of the heavy things on the order paper, I don't think it's likely that we'll finish those before November 12th.
Following his arrest and subsequent charge of breach of trust by a public officer, former Education Minister Myron V. Walwyn and local attorney has expressed concern that despite his full intention to fight the allegations against him, the conditions of indemnity granted to Commissioner Sir Gary Hickenbottom for the Commission of Inquiry report hindered him from taking certain civil action. He said, and I quote, "As a citizen and someone who was made a subject of the Commission of Inquiry, I am very concerned that prior to the release of the report, the Commissioner and his staff were indemnified from civil suits in relation to whatever they have written in the report. This essentially absolves them of any liability or responsibility for its contents. However, this very report is being used as the basis for investigating and bringing charges against local citizens." He said and described the charge against him as vexatious and extremely daunting and troubling to him. He further expressed the opinion, and I quote, "It cannot be right that a report which has the potential to ruin the careers, reputations, and quality of life and living for individuals to be allowed to hide behind an act of Parliament and escape the scrutiny of the courts. This action is not consistent with the tenets of accountability and transparency, which the very report claims that it seeks to promote." Now, according to a confirmation note released by the police following Walwyn's statement on the arrest, the former minister was charged with breach of trust by a public official following investigations into the Elmore Stout High School perimeter wall. More specifically, he is charged under Section 81 of the Criminal Code, which, according to the Criminal Code 1997 of the Virgin Islands, speaks to public officers receiving property or benefits in exchange for showing favor to the person conferring the said benefits. Now, in the same legislation, the offense carries a maximum sentence of 6 months in imprisonment and is noted as triable, subject to provisions of the Magistrates Code of Procedures Act and the Criminal Procedures Act. Now, of course, since his issuing of the statement announcing his arrest and charge, the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, has since issued a statement saying that his statements are impacting the jury for the said case, which is expected to be brought before the courts. Viewers, that is it for today's News Weekly News Roundup. Quite an impactful and heavy news week. We did not get to all the stories, but in case you missed any of them, be sure to follow us on social media at our website, 284media.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are 284 News, your source for honest and impartial news, right here, of course, on 284 Media. Happy Saturday again, and I trust that each of you are enjoying your weekend. I will see you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Is business slow? Cash flow down? Hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your